how did you approach your training? So let's break down the split, the volume, the frequency, the intensity of effort, all that good stuff that the listeners are curious about. What did that look like as you were approaching, we'll say, the World Championships? So let's start with that first. The British Championships, World Championships, and then did it evolve?
Ever since I started training when I was 13, it was always 3 days a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. At the time, it was quite a popular split, I guess, or maybe the people who I train with, that's kind of what we agreed on. And it was that way for years and years and years. And it was always the same sort of split. And it was quite low numbers when I was a lot younger. It was always sort of 8-6-4s on most things. So first set of 8 reps, working set, second set 6. So as the reps went down through the sets, the weights go up. The third and final set is 4 reps, maximum weight. I did that for years, and I think that probably contributed to my muscle density. And at the time, that was kind of what we thought was the best way to approach it. I dabbled with very, very briefly into powerlifting. The 4 reps kind of leans itself into maximal weights for powerlifting sort of thing. I did that for a couple of years. I did okay. I set some records, but I knew very quickly that I was kind of at my limit, or I didn't really enjoy it. I wasn't suited to it, opposed to bodybuilding. Very small waist, small wrists and ankles, so it doesn't really lend itself for maximal weight. And I think around the World Championships, the WNBF Worlds in America, I went to a seminar with Neil Hill. I had a good chat with him afterwards, and I asked him to give me a bit of an appraisal, and he was pretty impressed. He thinks, in his opinion, now it'll be better to go to 4 days. So I went from 3 days to 4 days. So I was training again. This was only, say, 10 years ago. Prior to that, everything was 3 days a week. So I moved to 4 days a week. I think my body was ready for that. So the reps went up and the sessions per week went up. So I think the intensity went up. But also I think that's when the pivotal point where I started to steer away from the really heavy, not 1 rep maxes, but the real gut busting stuff. I kind of think I need to be in a more of a bodybuilding zone, opposed to the compromising one where I was strong, but I wanted everything to go into bodybuilding. I think the reps needed to be higher. I noticed the difference. I think as I progressed through my competitions, I think every season I felt, and people fed back to me, that I was improving. I needed to do the 8-6-4s for all those years to make my foundations where they were. And then it evolved into more of a fine-tuning, bodybuilding-oriented sort of mindset.
To go back to the 8-6-4 for a second, what's interesting about that is, like, let's say you do a set of 8 to failure, let's just say, right? Naturally, on the second set, unless you're doing reps, apparently, like Robert Feasey, I don't know, again, I spoke with him and he was saying that. Did you check that one out?
I saw that one, yeah.
Okay, so for anyone who's curious about that, just go listen to the episode with Robert Feasey. But to stay on this, naturally speaking, reps will decline from set to set. So let's say you did 40 kg presses, for example, and you did a set of 8 to failure, okay? Naturally, if you did that same weight for a second set, probably get maybe 6, maybe 5. Yeah. So my question to you is, you said that you increased the weight from set to set. So it was an 8-6-4, right? So were those sets to failure or just close to it?
I think the problem is between the first set of 8 and the third set of 4, that's half. So you've got other factors in play. You can hold your breath for 4 reps a lot easier than you could hold your breath for 8 reps, for instance. You've got mental focus. You've got all and out expenditure. I think it's a different beast, maximal 8, maximal 4. You've got elements of recovery, haven't you, within certain parameters. And I can recover from 4 easier than 8 because it's literally half. So I know, although the numbers have halved, the energy expenditure is less because it's over a shorter duration. So if you need hand on heart, maybe you're holding back a little bit on the 8 and then the 6. So everything's sort of focusing up on the set of 4, but the 8 reps done well is a very, very solid foundation, and it's really setting the fires in place.
It's priming you for the 6 and the 4, and then the 6 is priming you for the 4. That's a similar approach to Rob Hope. Are you familiar with Rob Hope?
Yeah,
he was saying he does a similar approach with that, where he'll pyramid up, like how you just mentioned, and he will add weight, of course, as the reps drop. So you did mention that the 4, it hits you just differently than the 8. Fatigue wise, it hits you differently.
I think as well mentally, I know if I'm doing a 4, I'll do the first one. There's only 3 left. For the second one, I'm halfway there.
Right.
It's a lot easier to prime yourself and just drum that sort of repetitive into you, but only for, you do the first one, and then you do 2 in the middle, and then you do your last one. Unless somebody's really sort of mentally strong. I'm not saying I'm not, or I am, but it's just different because it is, and just the fact that I know I can recover from it. Once you start, then you're nearly there. Yeah,
You mentioned that you transitioned to the 4 days per week and then you started implementing higher reps. So
I did. Yeah.
yeah, so I'd be curious how your experience is with that, because just to relate with the higher rep stuff, that stuff is fatiguing. Like it just hits you different the next day, just right after. You just feel wiped. If you do it to failure or very close to it, obviously the higher reps you go, the harder it is to gauge the failure stuff. So what's your take on that? Like, how's your experience been with that?
I had a conversation with myself when I came back from 2015 on top of the world, achieved more than I ever thought I could. I always had even more desire to do well. And I said to myself on the plane home, actually, I said, so what do I need to do? What do I need to change? Was my exact turn of phrase. What do I need to change to make myself better again? What needs to change? And I've been training for years. So do I do more bench press? Yeah, I mean, I've bench pressed for years. Obviously, I've got as much out of that as I can. So what could I change? Well, it's the reps, isn't it? How about I do an 864? I do 3 10s, 3 honest 10 reps. And you need to be very honest with yourself and say, was that an honest 10 or wasn't it? And I felt that once I do that change, there's no point doing 864 to 975. That's not a change. That's nothing. What game changer can I bring in place? And by doing these 3 or 4 10s was something totally different. My logic was doing something totally different will give me the next increment positive to make me look different. That's what I decided to do, because doing more bench press, doing more 864s or whatever it might be, what's going to change? Nothing really. At what point have I maxed that out? That was a turning point for me, and lo and behold, I felt as if it started working. But again, the caveat on that would be that the foundation was already in place from years and years of 864. I didn't care about being stronger. I know as I was getting older, am I living on borrowed time now with injuries and things? You can't keep doing heavy fours. Brian Whitaker, for example, there came a point where his knee said, actually, it's too much, because he's a really strong guy. I wasn't fussed about being strong anymore. I'd done that. I wanted bodybuilding. So that was the change. And that was the catalyst for deciding to go down the road that I did.
Interesting. Let's stick to the World Championship approach first before we transition to the 4 day per week. With the 3 day per week, of course, if you had an extra rep or two, would you take it? Like, for example, obviously you got this 864 thing, but you're like, okay, well, I could do one more. Did you reserve yourself, or did you take that extra rep if you knew you had it in you?
Yeah, I take the rep. Yeah. I think with me, everything's written down, everything's programmed and structured. I know what I can do. Ironically, because I knew what I could do or what I'm capable of, as I was dieting down, logic says I'm going to get weaker and I'm going to get more tired. If I can achieve something off season and I can achieve the same thing, really, really lean, the off season's not right. So I really focused on how long can I cling on to my numbers? And that's kind of the game I was playing with myself. How long can I maintain this? And what's the minimum I need to come down to still achieve these numbers? And that's how I approached it. Just keeping me honest. And if I had to drop a bit of weight, then so be it. But I knew what my markers were, if you like, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And you know what? If you can get another clean, high quality repetition, then take it. There's no reason you shouldn't. However, if you know that on that next rep, it's just going to break down and it's going to be a disaster, well, then train to train another day, quoting Marshall Johnson here. For those listening, you know what I'm saying. If you watch that episode, that quote applies perfectly. You train to train another day, shut that down, and you can always try next time for that extra one if you want to take that approach with it.
There's a massive caveat to that as well, that at no point do I sacrifice my quality. I'm known in my circle for being very, very clinical with my execution. Like every rep is textbook. And so if you need to compromise or jeopardize your form or the quality of your reps for this arbitrary number, then you're literally robbing yourself. And I really don't see the point of robbing yourself.
That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. With regards to the sample, give a sample now. So you said you do chest and triceps, back and biceps, and then legs. Or no, sorry, legs and break that down again. That 3 day split.
The old 3 day split, yeah. So it was back and biceps, chest and triceps, and then shoulders and sort of ancillary sort of thing.
Got it. So shoulders and legs were together?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
So how'd that look? Like you would hit the legs first and then tap into some shoulders after, maybe some presses, lateral raises?
Yeah. I mean, because obviously legs, I always look at the biggest engines first, the biggest taxing thing. So yeah, it was always legs first. That's kind of how my training evolved. That's how I migrated into 4 days. I looked at myself and I wanted to really sort of key out some areas of attention. How I train now sounds bizarre when I divulge it. Once I've explained it, it's perfect logic. And that's kind of another reason why I went to 4 days. For the 3 day split, that's how it looked.
If I have it right, did you just separate the leg and shoulder day and made it a 4 day split that way?
What I did is like getting too geeky, I wrote everything down and I gave everything a priority number. So you have to be honest with yourself to do this. So it goes from 1 to 3. If I'm really happy with my strongest body part, then will be a 3. The area that is okay will be a 2. The areas that I'm not happy with is a 1. So I make sure that a 1 is not on the same day as another 1. Every item 1 has its own dedicated day. So it's kind of like prioritizing. With that in mind, I base it on 4 days. So I've got 4 days. And then how many number 1s have I got? How many number 2s have I got? How many number 3s have I got? And then you equally separate them. And that's your split.
So what does that look like? Is that kind of like a full body at this point? Or how's that looking?
So it goes on a Monday. So this is a 4-day. A Monday, and number 1 is legs. So I've got Monday is quads and biceps. So a quad is a 1, a bicep is a 3, and a shoulder is a 2. So I've got a 1, priority 1, priority 2, and a priority 3. So quads first, biceps, shoulders. That's one session. Session 2 is chest and triceps and abs. That's a bit of an anomaly there because day 1 is a really hard day. So session 2 is slightly easier to allow me to go into day 3. So day 1, quads, biceps, shoulders. Day 2 is chest, triceps, abs. And day 3 is hamstrings, which is another 1, back, which is a 2, and a bicep 3. So that's how I prioritize day 3. So it's hamstrings, back, biceps. So there's my priority. And day 4 is shoulders and calves. So I've given myself a big day, a smaller day, big day, smaller day. So the 4th day is literally just shoulders and calves. Shoulders is a 1, calves is a 3.
So what are the rest days? Are you pretty flexible with that, or are you pretty strict with that? For example, you said 4 days per week. So I'm assuming that it's pretty strict then as far as where you place your rest days.
Yeah, so it goes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday AM. I've tried it. It's awkward because obviously you've got 7 days in a week. Like if there's 8 days, that'd be perfect. So I try and put a day in between because I find as if I get really bad DOMs or whatever, that I need that extra day. I put days together and I don't get as much out of it. I find as a natural, especially, I need that day's separation.
So I'm curious about the mindset a little bit with that or the mentality. You mentioned if it was an 8-day week, that would be perfect because you could slide that rest day in, right? Have you, and I'm sure you have, but maybe there's other reasons why you haven't done it this way, but have you just thought of just, all right, well, whatever, we'll just roll it into the next week and I'll just stick to this one on, one off cycle. Have you thought of that before? And is there a reason why you didn't do that?
I've thought about it. I'm a creature of habit. And I think bodybuilding it's quite a selfish sport anyway. You obviously experience that yourself. Having the set days, I can set routines. People can set routines around me, more importantly. And I just know where I am. I need to know what I'm doing and what days. And then I can plan things accordingly in the days that I'm not at the gym. Solely for that reason, really.
And I'm assuming there's a lot of factors that go into that, family, lifestyle, your job. There's so many things that have to be considered when you're talking about a workout schedule. So that makes complete sense. Yeah. If you had the luxury of none of that other stuff was playing a factor, then maybe you probably would do something like that, right? So let's go back for a second. We're talking about 3 sets, hard sets per exercise, essentially, right? Is that for every exercise you were doing that with the 864?
Yeah, I didn't actually do that many exercises because each exercise, as in a bench press 864, there's only so many times I can do that because it was very intense, very weight orientated. And I knew that there's only so much I can perform in one session with the heavy weights in mind. So there's only maybe 5 exercises in total. It wasn't a great deal.
Was that for every workout that you did? So the Monday, Wednesday, Friday was 5, 5, 5 pretty much as far as how many exercises you were doing? Okay.
Yeah.
So about 15 sets.
Yeah.
Hard sets.
At the most, sometimes it might even be 4 exercises.
Wow. So if we're talking about like sets per body part, you weren't doing that many. You might have been like, well, because you were combining muscle groups. So like 6?
2 per.
So it was like what, 6 hard sets per body part in a way? If you look at like, say you did your chest and your biceps, right? Together. Or was it chest and tricep? Chest and tricep.
Yeah,
chest and triceps. 5 exercises. And I'm assuming there was an isolation exercise in there, like a push down or maybe or is it all compounds?
Always compounds first.
Okay.
And then, ancillaries to finish off that. So far, I'm going to take chest and triceps. And it was 5 exercises. It would probably be 3 for chest and 2 for triceps. And that was it for chest and triceps.
3 exercises for chest and 2 for triceps. Oh, yeah. So 9 hard sets for your chest in a week, direct work. But that was what you ran for most of your career, was that, right?
Yeah, a long, long time. Yeah. I mean, there's an argument that maybe if I'd introduced what I do now sooner, I don't know, where would I be? Who knows? But I think, like I said before, that laid some very good foundations, and maybe at the time, my genetics, it was perfect partnership. Yeah. No one knows
But it's also not that different. I mean, you're doing 4 days per week, but as far as how many hard sets per body part that you're doing directly hitting these muscle groups, it's still around 9, isn't it? For the big ones, and maybe for the smaller muscle groups like your biceps and your triceps, that direct work, maybe a bit less. If you had to calculate it in your head, since you're the math guy, you had the numbers, what would that look like for you right now?
Well, for my 4-day split now,
Yeah.
say you're in 3 sets, 8-6-4, I'll probably do 3 to 4 sets of 10. So that's when the numbers start to really climb, you know.
Gotcha. So you pumped up the volume a bit from how you were doing things before. And you're saying that you've noticed improvements in the development of your physique.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's after how many years of training? Because you said you just started adopting that the last 10 years?
Say 9 years then. Yeah, I'd say. Yeah.
And you were 35 basically when you stopped the 3-day routine and stopped that amount of volume that you were doing and you transitioned to this.
Won't be too far away to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the age you started lifting?
So it was a good 22 years. That's what prompted the conversation with myself to say, what needs to change? What options have I got? What parameters to change? Because I decided I wanted to change.
Sometimes you got to get out of that structural rut, right? People are doing their programs or just so used to it. Creatures have habit, like you said. Maybe there's people listening that are like that. And maybe there could be a change that they could make that could help propel them forward because they've been doing the same thing for so many years, right? There's that old saying, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Or did I say that right? I think I said that right.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's not that it was or wasn't broken. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that you noticed that progress maybe stalled and you were looking for more progress. So in order to get more progress, maybe doing the same thing that had you stall is not the answer, right? That's why you made that change. So I broke that down in a very simple way for those tuning in, but that's what it was, right?
Yeah. A great example that I love to use is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing every day and expecting a different result. That's kind of where I was, you know. How many bench presses can I do at 8 reps and 4? Yeah, I mean, what's going to change? After a while, it's diminishing returns, isn't it?
Did you also notice that the strength progression stalled as well? Like if you were doing that 4, couldn't get past a certain amount of load. Is that what it started? Okay.
I'm natural. What's going to happen if I bench pressed, as an example, 8-6-4 for the next 10 years? Carry that logic, I'll be bench pressing 300 kilos, wouldn't I? It's not going to happen.
But to point out something that I think is also important, don't be that person who's changing things up every week because that's another whole problem, right? So
definitely.
Yeah.
I think don't fall into a rut or force yourself into a rut because you feel as if you have to. I would change things in a logical, periodic way. But yeah, you need a line in the sand and a benchmark to set things off.
For sure. You know, it's interesting though, that for example, I spoke with Mark Oakes. You're familiar with Mark Oakes?
Yeah.
Right. And he never repeated the same workout twice as far as exercise order. Like I thought that was really interesting. Yeah. So, you know, it's fascinating. I mean, there's a lot that goes into catering to the psychological aspects of this too, like making sure that you're doing it to enjoy it as well. And there could be a case made for changing things as far as how that affects wear and tear on your body too. So there's a lot of pros and cons, right? And you have to manage that and understand how to formulate that in the right way for you and your needs and your goals, right? So